Joining you from the world-famous Performance Center of LAFC in its all
It's probably all
glory
blown out. I don't know if they can even really see it.
Can they not see it? Lots of construction going on there for some new fields or parking structure. We're here, obviously the LAFC offseason.
You're talking in your inside voice because you're afraid that people will hear you. There's coaches all around here.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. I don't want to.
Yeah.
No, but there's the business of LAFC is still going on. We have a very special podcast coming up today. John Thorrington, general manager, co-president. You'll definitely want to stick around. It was well publicized. Many of you were able to send questions. We were able to use a couple of them. So stick around to see exactly what those
I will
were.
apologize. We did not give any direct shout outs to the people that asked those questions, but a lot of you asked the same questions anyway. So you'll get some of the answers you're looking for.
You'll get answers. So we'll talk more about LAFC with John, but we're here. We do a service of Major League Soccer. We're keeping an eye on what's happening in the league, and the playoffs still go on. And now we're down to an MLS Cup. So it's the.
You're here to brag.
I'm not here to brag.
I can see it on your face.
I can't brag because I said Vancouver was going to get in the final, but I did say that
you did have a you had a Cascadia team in the final, and you had NYCFC.
That's a good way to spin it, actually.
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that for you.
I was this close, but I had New York City FC winning it. Obviously assisted by a very peculiar situation.
The league has to be excited, right?
Well, when
LAFC fans won't want to hear that we're going to sing the praises of the Portland fan base, but an MLS Cup in Portland's pretty cool.
It's good, and then Portland's got a status as an MLS club. And look, I lived in Connecticut, so I was within the shadows of New York fandom, and it gets obnoxious. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But having good New York franchises, as is having good LA franchises, even if you're not from those cities, is good for sports leagues. It's good to be in the media capital of the world with a team. Not to say that Major League Soccer is going to oversaturate, or NYCFC is going to oversaturate the news cycles there, but it helps, especially when you don't have a lot of winning going on. So this is, and you look at a final and that's marketable, it's something you can promote, this is a good one.
Yeah, well, with what it could have been, you know, like, no offense to Philly, but a Philly RSL MLS Cup final. And we even get into it with John.
I will say I enjoyed the atmosphere there.
Well, these playoffs have laid bare what we said last week, which was like the MLS Cup trophy is such a different trophy than the actual champion of MLS, right? The Supporter Shield, and again, I'm not trying to say one is better than the other, but one really is 1A and 1B, and it takes a different level of skill and a different level of know-how to win a trophy that is 6 months long, which is the Supporter Shield, which is the best team through that 6 months, and a trophy that is 4 games, essentially 4 games.
Would you crown an MLS champion by having another game on the calendar? We know the league always wants to add some more prominent games. Supporter Shield versus MLS Cup.
I wouldn't crown a champion that way, but I love your idea because it adds to the trophy haul to kind of allow us to diversify. I like the idea of this trophy takes this to win it. This trophy takes this to win it. You can have your preference. You definitely want all of them. Like, why wouldn't you want to win Supporter Shield, win the MLS Cup, and then if they do this, our idea, the Max and Vince Cup of Supporter Shield winner versus...
It's a great name for it.
The Supporter Shield winner versus the MLS Cup winner. You would want all 3, but I know the people in this building know that it takes very different things to win that. And I know all across MLS that GMs, players know that it takes very different things, and I think... I don't know. It feels weird saying that the MLS Cup, they're the champion. We don't care about anything else. I just feel like there's a little nuance to it.
It's a little different too than what you look at other leagues that have playoffs. League MX comes right to the top of the list, but that playoff is, look, it's wild too. I mean, but you have home and away legs. It's a little bit more of an extensive.
They used to have it where if you were tied after extra time, it was just the higher seed that would go through. Well, that's crazy.
Well, Atlas got to the final last night because, and we're recording this on a Tuesday. Or on a Monday, sorry. They got into a final last night, 1-1 aggregate, because they were the higher seed over Pumas. They are still doing it.
Because they've gotten rid of away goals instead of doing the seeds.
Yes, so there's protections for higher seeds. And in the end, I think they got 2 very high seeds in Atlas and Leon to the final. MLS, this playoff was an absolute sprint. And then even when you have a higher seed that gets through, you have New England saying, we haven't played in 3 weeks. Yeah. So it's tricky. And I think when you have historic supporter shields like they had LAFC in 2019 and New England 2021, you don't want to sweep that under the rug. That was something to celebrate and give it as much accolades as possible.
Well, I was curious about this, so I did a very...
I still have my inside voice, by the way.
You do still have your inside voice. I was curious about this, so I did a very scientific thing. I did a poll on Twitter, super scientific. And basically what I posted was, which team had the best year? Philly, second in their conference, won 2 playoff games, but out in the conference final. New England.
This is a good poll.
Supporter Shield winners. Didn't win any playoff games, went out in the second round.
Everyone said Philly?
Or RSL, who is 7th in their conference, won 2 playoff games, went out in the Western Conference final. And the answer should have been just New England, straight through, right? No, quite a few picks for RSL and Philly. So it does give you an idea of where fans' minds are at. They really want that MLS Cup trophy, and I get it. But man, if I'm a fan and I watch my team for 7 months be RSL and then get to the Western Conference final and lose, I don't think I had a better year than New England or Philly.
And that Damir Kreilach goal that got them right in the playoffs in the last minute.
Look, RSL fans, celebrate it. It was cool to rally around your team. It was fun. David Ochoa talking smack. Damir Kreilach playing well. Rusnak out and then back in. But come on. Wouldn't you rather have 6 months of every time you go to the stadium you think you're going to win at home?
Yeah, 100%. But there's a perception, There's a perception that there's going to change.
Trophies over everything.
Trophies over everything. The U.S. system, we love our playoffs, which we do. I don't want to lose the MLS Cup playoffs. I truly enjoyed these games.
I'm not saying we lose them. It's 1A, 1B.
Okay. Let's do it together.
So who wins it?
I'm sticking with my pick, although I think Portland at home is going to be
tough one.
And New York City FC, man, they grinded through to get that victory over New England, but they faced a team that may have been a bit rusty, and certainly with Philadelphia, with 11 players in a protocol situation, which really hasn't got a precedent before. It's certainly because these weren't players that had COVID. They were just in a protocol, and it didn't.
Yeah, it made it a game. And you know what would have been crazy is if they had won, they wouldn't have been able to take part in the final either, because it's 10 days of protocol.
Oh, boy.
Unless they had changed the rules. By the way, you can undo your inside voice because John just shut the door to his office,
great. That's part. No, I thought I raised it a couple. I thought I raised it up to about 8 or 9, but not quite there yet. So we'll talk a little bit about, LAFC and where it pertains. It's going to get, as we talked to John here, it's going to get very busy, and news will be coming in thick and fast because the beginning of the new season's not that far away. The business has begun. We talked about the roster decisions made. A couple players. It's all about keeping guys active as much as possible, especially those, and we'll talk to John about that, especially those who have international aspirations, because we're heading into a World Cup year. That's really important for these guys, and there are several on this LAFC squad. Something
really important that he pointed out, and we keep saying this, it's the shortest offseason in MLS history. Yes and no. It is if you're the team going all the way to MLS Cup final, but John pointed out this is the longest offseason in LAFC history because they have not made the playoffs. This time last year, they were preparing for a Champions League run. So actually, to your point, guys got to stay active. It's quirky. The weirdest thing about our little piece of pie here in MLS is the sheer layoff of these players. And it's nice that some of our guys, Tomas Romero, Cheeky, Sifu, are getting to play in games, maybe not of consequence, but they're staying active.
The U.S. roster announced by Greg Berhalter, they're going to be playing here at Dignity Health Sports Park, and he was very quick to say a lot of these MLS players, it's predominantly MLS, a couple USL players, 2 European-based players, and 1 who plays in Brazil. But for the MLS guys, to get them engaged, to get them those reps. There's no LAFC guys on that roster, but Cheeky and Sifu did play for Ecuador in a friendly. That matters. It just keeps you in that rhythm, and we'll see where these other guys can possibly get some minutes. But if it's not there through a national team, you find ways here through the club. But the training will certainly begin in due time, and we'll hit the new year. But it feels very odd because it's quiet, but it's going to get very noisy.
Well, and for Cheeky and Sifu, who have been called up recently for the competitive games, but have kind of been on the outside looking in, they want to stay in the mind of the coach because that Ecuador team looks like they're going to the World Cup, and those guys want to be at least considered to be on that plane. So they have to take these games seriously, even if they are quote unquote friendly.
And there'll be opportunities. So the offseason begins for Major League Soccer, and I remember back in the old days where the offseason came, it came and it went. You didn't blink an eye.
Guys had to go do their second job.
Yeah, everything was very pretty predictable. And then remember, 2007, David Beckham's coming here.
Right.
And then it became a league where there were going to be some big moves with the designated player designation. And one thing I want to talk to you about here and what we saw, that these things are not confirmed yet. These are reports here, but Vélez Sarsfield certainly did. Thiago Almada, who is arguably one of the top 3 South American
Atlanta really went
young
out of their way
prospects.
to make sure that everyone knew that that was not confirmed. Huh?
Atlanta said it was not confirmed, but then Velas, but whatever it is, we're not confirming anything here, but this is what we're reading. But the price tags for some of these players, it's something that we haven't seen. $16 million reported for Almada from Atlanta United. There was another one for Orlando. Was it for
Facundo Torres for $10 million? Who we know well from
It's a Peñarol player, which is where Brian Rodriguez and Diego Rossi came from. But we know South America is a marketplace, but now it's becoming it's becoming a situation where it's a frenzy to get these players because they're out there. There's a lot of talent, but you have a lot of clubs. You certainly knew that in Mexico and in Europe, but Major League Soccer has really pushed almost ahead of both of them to find these good young players.
So we're literally talking about...
Almada's at the top of the list.
And I think
whether he turns out to be a great player, he's at the top of that list.
I think Facundo Torres is probably in the top 10 too.
He's top 10.
Maybe even top 5.
A regular player for a very good Peñarol team.
And it didn't seem like... I mean, maybe there was, and we just didn't see it. There's probably plenty of reports in South America and Argentina, but it didn't seem like there was much of a wrestling match for it. It was just like, Thiago Almada is going to Atlanta United. They almost had him this season, it looked like. And then Facundo Torres, it comes up. Everyone kind of knew he was getting ready, kind of primed to move. It's like he's available, and now all of a sudden he might be going to Orlando. So it's interesting, the buying power. And maybe it's because they are willing to shell out the 16 millions, the 10 millions. Maybe we are now outpricing those places that could have gone.
That is a lot. A return. You're hoping that there's a huge return of investment.
You got to sell the guy for 20, 25 million. How many guys from MLS have gone for that much money? One.
But the reach in South America is even beginning. Going back to last season when FC Cincinnati brought in Brenner, and Brazilian players are always viewed as too expensive, which they are. I mean, there's a reason if you're good in Brazil, you're going to get a lot of attention.
To get you into the MLS Cup final.
Yes.
Thais Magno,
again, a guy that was part of a young group for New York City FC that they said he's going to be good in a couple years. He just scored the biggest goal in New York City FC history.
Yeah. And he won't start. He won't start the final.
He won't.
Tati Castellanos will be back.
It's unbelievable to see, but they're not going to all hit.
Yeah.
But clubs are knowing that they have to kind of be on top of it. The scouting has to be up to snuff, and they have to strike early. There's a lot of apparatus to be able to find these guys. The new young DP rule, which we'll ask John a little bit about as well, gives you an outlet. The guy Chu at Seattle was at Gremio. There's guys out there, you hear this. So it used to be, let's go to Colombia, maybe get a good deal in Venezuela, but now it's everywhere. Argentina, Brazil, where everyone else is scouting.
Well, remember when LAFC went to Uruguay, and we knew there was good players in Uruguay. This is not breaking news, but that was kind of like people were saying, you know, it might be a little bit of an untapped market. Clearly now, a lot of teams have gone to Uruguay to get star players out of there, but it's like you said, we're not just going to untapped markets. They're going to Brazil. They're going to the Argentinas. They've basically opened up the Venezuelan pipeline, Ecuadorian pipeline. I mean, it's kind of cool, and it's you got to keep up with the Joneses now, right? Like if you see Atlanta spending 16, and look, here's something that. By the way,
LAFC's been always hitting the right pipeline. The Uruguayan pipeline has been very good.
Yeah, they've been opening it up.
The Ecuadorian pipeline with Sifu and Chiki, but Anderson Julio at Real Salt Lake, another one. That pipeline is pumping.
Yeah, and look, with Atlanta, there is some caveats, right? Taylor Twellman's reported this, the dirty little secret. I mean, they have Arthur Blank, right? They didn't have to pay for their stadium the way LAFC had to pay for their stadium. It was already being there for them for the Falcons. So that's not on their balance sheet when they're thinking about dropping $16 million. Whereas if LAFC is thinking about dropping $16 million, they're thinking, okay, we also have this great stadium. And look, I know fans are going to scream saying, well, you got to do this. Look, you got to build it in the right way. And these things have to be considered. I'm not breaking any news here. These are just the facts. But it is still cool when Atlanta United is saying, we don't care. Let's go for it. And Orlando's spending possibly $10 million on Facundo Torres, which I've heard could be up to $14 million, is huge for Orlando, a team that literally has been sold. Have they changed hands twice in the past 5 years?
Exactly. Yeah, they have.
So that ownership base is saying, this is worth it.
You have a lot of clubs there that there's feeling pressure. We know Houston's got new ownership. They go, we got to go out and change the outlook of this team.
Houston in for
you
Jonah
have a
Dos Santos.
Charlotte team coming in. We know Austin. All these teams know that they have to make that club whole, have to bring in good talent. And by the way, I recommend everyone to start watching a lot more South American football. Watch some Libertadores or Copa Sudamericana and find out who these talents are.
Who might we hear on those games?
I might be calling some. Depends on how many trips I make out.
I was hoping for Nigel Rio Coker.
By the way, did I tell you this one about? I probably did about some of the names and how to pronounce the Brazilian names.
Oh yes, these are always so much fun.
Was it Robert or no? Robert? It would say just crazy. So Ferreira is Fajeda. Fajeda.
Okay.
Very good.
Well, we've done the old joke, the Jonathan Woodgate, and Tim Vickery said they used to say Woodgate.
Woodgate, love it. So brush up on that, and look, their season kind of aligns a little bit better here with Major League Soccer, and it's bearing a lot of fruit, and the league is going to get competitive. So LAFC, if they want to keep themselves ahead of all these competitors, everyone's out looking for the next big thing. We have the next big thing coming up right now. John Thorrington, General Manager, Co-President of LAFC, joining us here. We'll answer a lot of your questions. He's always great in this forum. That's coming up. We're back here on Inside LAFC, the Max and Vince podcast. Always an honor to be joined by John Thorrington, Co-President and General Manager of LAFC. And it is the LAFC offseason. I want to start by getting your thoughts on the MLS Cup playoffs. Just as we drew it up, the 4th seeds from both make the final. 7th seed Real Salt Lake. How have you viewed this playoffs? Because it's an absolute sprint.
It is. I mean, what I said earlier today, someone asked me the question, it sums up 2021 for me. I mean, I think to see, what I will say, however, I think that there are, especially in the East, I don't want to say this, patting myself on the, I picked New York City.
You're not the only one here who did that, by the way.
And I'm sure a lot of people are saying that today. But I do have verification that I did say that. But I think they've done a great job. I think both teams finished the season really strong, and you don't have to look too far. Any year in MLS, that's what's key, right? Is peaking at the right time. Both teams have. I think Portland finished the season really strong results-wise. New York City as well, and so you're seeing 2 informed teams. You have to. Your heart has to go out to Philly. I mean, to work that hard to get to qualify, to then host a playoff game, a big game, and then just be decimated through COVID. It just that's just the age we're in right now. I hope we're out of it soon, but that has to just be so heartbreaking for them. And my sympathies are out to Jim Curtin and that group.
John, I'm wondering how you feel about, because we've had a lot of conversations up here about how can we make the league more competitive, how can we make the competition structure better. So I'm wondering what you think about this. Article came out from Brian Strauss, Sports Illustrated. 20 of the last 22 #1 seeds have not made it to the MLS Cup final since 2011, and only 2 Supporter Shields winners have made it. Are we not giving an equitable share to the Supporter Shield? How can we make this better?
Well, I think it's just what we're identifying is that we're trying. How do you identify the best team? So MLS like if you go to England, you have an FA Cup and you have the league, right? And both are amazing, but our playoffs are like the FA Cup with some qualification parameters in it. But that's basically what it is. And it's not often that you see the FA Cup winner win the league. And so it's a challenge. If I were to brainstorm ideas, like, can you give so New England finishes the season, they're chasing this record, they asterisk beat ours, and you say they were 23 days without playing a game.
Yep.
I mean, like, that doesn't help them. So I think if you're playing 3-game weeks and they miss the Wednesday, but they're playing in 7 days and they're in a rhythm, but it completely, like, the rhythm they had throughout the year gets totally upset ahead of the biggest game they have. We had a version of this, I felt like, in 2019, where we were, we had the bye, then we had this huge game against the Galaxy, and then right away, so you go from nothing, and then it's like bang, bang. So it's difficult. Can you? I'm thinking out loud.
Love it. Love it.
Could New England have gotten a return leg?
Right.
Something where it's like they have the one game and you almost give them a second chance. The way the league used to be, where you'd have 3 games in one series, that's just not, I don't think, appropriate.
First to 5 points or whatever the weird thing was.
That's just not appropriate now, given the congested calendar. But you're hitting on the topic, right? All of us say, and the number of messages I got, see, you guys did it, you guys 2019. But what it does prove is it is a long and hard season. And if you put a lot into the regular season, it's 2 have done it, carried on, and winning MLS Cup. It's really, really hard.
I think the biggest point, though, he nailed it right on the head, was it's like 1A and 1B, right? They're 2 different trophies. So maybe I don't know how we do condition people to think of them as 2 different trophies, but they really are. They're not a continuation.
Right. And so to me, if you were to say, and this was a part of it, is define success. Would you rather be the MLS Cup winner, have a group that is capable of winning MLS Cup, and do you design it towards that? Or would you rather say, no, I think over the course of 34 games, I want the team that over the course of the year gets the most points. That, to me, is success. And I think what you're starting to see is teams are going to have to decide. It's really hard to do both. We've tried, right? And that's still going to be our aim, but it's hard.
Good segue.
It's a good segue. Let's talk about the season as it obviously didn't hit the goals you would like. That's why we're here preparing for the off season. But what did you look at from 2021 that you can set a foundation on for the next season that's coming?
Yeah, I think our season had a few different periods to it. I think we had a strong start, and we felt the team you saw on the field looked like LAFC. It felt like LAFC. But you're like, man, there's just that cutting edge missing. Carlos goes down, Brian's in, whatever it was. But you think, okay, it still felt like LAFC, looked like LAFC. And I would say for the majority of the season, that was the case. I'm sure you guys being you guys, and I'm sure some of your listeners will have seen and heard of some of the data that people talk about that, someone on Saturday was saying it was a consultant group that did a study of KPIs you need to hit to be successful in MLS, playoff qualification, advancing in playoffs, and what have you. And throughout the history of MLS, they looked at these KPIs. And if you do this, this, and this, say 5 points, this is what happens. We're the only team in history who hit all 5 and didn't make the playoffs. So, that's, I've said this multiple times, and I think on this show, that's a problem, but a better problem, but more frustrating than just saying, look, you're no good, not good enough, rehaul the roster over. That's not what we have. And I think we saw that we were incredibly inefficient with the chances we had, historically so. And we also gave up, of the chances we give up numerically, we give up too many goals. And whether that was a mistake, whether that was someone not making a play, it was just, so you combine those two things and we hit this part of the season where you're like, this cannot continue. Impossible. It is not sustainable that this, people call it luck, whatever it is, can continue, and it did. It was historic. The outlier that we are when you map us on an axis, you have to zoom out to fit us in the grid. So that was very frustrating. And then I think, frankly, as we came towards the end of the season, crunch time, I think injuries took their toll, and you started to see us have to adapt how we play, formation, positionally, and I credit the guys that never gave up. We had left backs playing in central midfield. We had some of our best players out for prolonged periods of time, whether that was Eddie Segura with an ACL, whether that was Carlos, whether that's Edward, Diego going, all of these things combined. I think it was just a little bit too much for us in the end, but I have to credit the fight these guys had. And I mean, we actually finished the season in really good form results-wise. Ironically, some of it wasn't our best performances. We were getting results. Earlier in the season, our performance was really good. We weren't getting the results. So it was a really interesting season. But to get to your question, what did we learn? What can we take forward? I think it tells us that the building blocks are here. This is not an overhaul. This is just a tweaking of what we already have. Obviously, we have a big decision to make in who's going to lead the team as head coach. We have some amazing candidates that we're working through now and going through a very diligent process in that regard. And we also have the most flexibility we've ever had going into an offseason in terms of improving the players. And our scouting, our data, our staff here have been working tirelessly through a list of options that we're really excited about bringing to LAFC for 2022. If I were to highlight a few individuals that I would say are a big part of that core who we saw take, despite the collective disappointment we had, really take steps forward, I would have to start with Fall. I think this season and the circumstances it presented probably gave him more of a chance to flourish than is typical. So that's a blessing in disguise. I think Cifuentes really took a step forward and showed that he can be a premier attacking midfielder, defensive midfielder, box-to-box midfielder. Showed great versatility, but one of the top midfielders in the league. And the scary thing with him is I actually think there's still more to come. You look at Chicho, and without getting maybe exaggerating, you could argue he saved our season. He came in summer, took zero time to get acclimated, and just I mean, his goal scoring rate was record setting.
Everyone loves him too. He's just a wonderful guy.
Look, when we looked at our roster at the beginning of the year, and what's difficult is you don't have full clarity. We didn't know whether we were going to sell Diego while our window was still open, and all of a sudden you're going and getting a DP. We didn't know whether we'd sell him at all. So you look at all of these contingencies and you say, okay, if you don't have a DP slot to fill, who is the best guy? And we all circled up, that's the guy. We always get great help from Juan Pablo Angel down there in Colombia, helping us identify these guys, recruit these guys. And he was so excited to come. He had been the top scorer in Colombia. He was so excited to come, came off a really good season. They made the final in Colombia and just continued doing what he did in Colombia, adapted to how we play. Again, I still think there's more to come from him. The result, I'm not going to say he's going to score at the exact same rate, but I just think in terms of giving himself now an appropriate time of rest, but then to come back with a full preseason with our group, with the attacking pieces to work in a preseason, I think will certainly help him and us.
John, you mentioned our listeners, and maybe was it a mistake to solicit questions? We said we were going to have you on the podcast. You're not on social media.
You have to get through there a little bit, but there were some.
Luckily, so we solicited for you because you're not on there.
Love it.
Look, I'd be remiss if I don't
day.
ask. Here's the number one question: who's the next coach going to be? You can answer that any way you want. I just have to say I asked it for our social media supporters.
A great coach.
Great.
Yes.
Cool. Okay, now that we've got that out of the way for all of those people,
Had to be done. Had to be done.
You did talk. So you did double duty here. You were with Max for a broadcast interview. I got to listen in, which actually kind of was nice to get to hear your original answers. So what I want to ask is, when you're looking at a profile of coach, you spoke about how the playing style is not going to change. A lot of things are going to be similar to the way you looked for a coach 5-6 years ago. What are going to be the differences that you're looking for that in this next coach from Bob?
Yeah, good question. I think what I did is I looked back at our study and our process that landed us on Bob, right? And I looked at weighted criteria of everything we looked for and the board's involved in this, and we said, okay, we have this vision as to what LAFC is going to be on the field, off the field, et cetera. What are the characteristics that are key in this head coach? And we went through all of them. As I go back to those characteristics now, I think all are important. I would say some of them are, while important, I would weigh a little bit differently. So, and that is to say, I think now the importance of establishing a culture is different from maintaining and building on a culture. So there are little tweaks in there that I think maybe could land you on a different profile. I think everybody talks about MLS experience as an example. I think year one, I think MLS experience was more important than it is now. That is not to say I don't think MLS, if anybody understands the importance of MLS experience is me, I totally get that. But that is just one example of a factor that I would weigh a little bit differently now, that while it is still important and valuable, maybe is a little bit different now in year 5 than it would have been in year 1.
A follow-up with regards to the coaching situation and when it became open, when Bob Bradley went over to Toronto FC. Were you surprised about the clout that this job, this LAFC gig, people approaching you about possibly being the next LAFC coach? What was that like in the coaching search universe that this job was open and certain candidates would like to be here?
Yeah, I keep saying I'm surprised, but the easy answer would be I'm surprised you're surprised, because I keep saying it. Yeah, and again, this is testament not to me. This is our supporters, this is our owners, this is our players, this is Bob, this is our staff. Where they have set this club up reputationally, globally, that's where I'm just, and look, it's kudos to everybody else. It is incredible what this club has achieved in 4 years in that regard, that you can talk to somebody that has been a Champions League coach in Europe and they know exactly who LAFC is. And it is, I guess I shouldn't say surprising, I guess it is just validating and affirming that is something we've talked about being a global brand. If you talk to domestic candidates, that's the place I want to be. And that, again, is no pat on my back. That is just testament to what everybody in this building, our owners, our business ops, our organization has helped, set this stage for somebody that they are very excited to jump on.
Our podcast too, by the way. I'm just kidding, but it's
mainly podcast.
Well, let's talk a little bit about roster building now. We've kind of gone into coach. It's got to be interesting to build a roster without input from a coach yet, or maybe there is some input that you're getting, but a lot of the microscope is going to be on you for that reason. Last time we talked to you, you talked a little bit about how you started to come around to prioritizing maybe a little bit more, and not to say that you didn't weigh it before, but like you said, maybe it's weighing heavier for you. Veteran-type presences, especially veterans that maybe know the league, and then possibly even veteran DPs. Where's your mindset now as you're looking towards the season, especially considering Carlos Vela's on a team option, and I'm assuming you got to decide a long-term contract or if he's going to be here. It's not really he's going to play on a 6-month contract.
I wouldn't rule that out. I think every option is on the table with Carlos, just to address that, and we have exercised the option, so now he is here. So, yeah, what I would say is I'll belabor the term balance. I think as you build a roster, you have to think about the makeup of the roster, and we are different. We are not, we have a different profile of player largely than a lot of the league. And so for us, what I think, if I take a guy like Jordan Harvey and the importance he has had at this club, and maybe people don't see it because recently hasn't played every game and what have you, but that experience, know-how, leadership is invaluable within a group, within a locker room that for us, I definitely see the value in. I tried to be one of those guys myself towards the latter end of my career. Our coaches that are still here, they know that. Our staff knows that. Our performance staff, everything, just guys that help build and inculcate culture, right? Those are the types of guys that we want. Now, does that mean it has to be a domestic guy? No, Chicho can do that for us. Chicho is a real guy. Murray has helped with that. Eddie Segura helps with that. But it's about finding a balance, and I think one thing we're looking at is, do we have enough MLS experience with this group to do things like win MLS Cup? Like, you set us up on a field in a one-off against any team, I don't think we would fear that. It's the prolonged, the ins and outs, the travel, the professionalism, all of that, the high standards that needs to be player-driven. That's something we're certainly looking at.
Being equipped here in this offseason, obviously you've accrued some allocation money. You have the DP pending, certainly with Diego Rossi, who's in Turkey, doing very well as we record this pod, coming off a weekend where he scored a goal. At your fingertips as you approach this marketplace here that's opening here very soon, where do you see LAFC standing?
Well, and if I could add just on top of that, the Under-22 initiative is something
of course. Yeah.
A lot of people have brought up, and LAFC hasn't talked so much about it because it came up mid-season. Actually, a lot of people don't even know too much about it. So if you could kind of layer that into that discussion.
Do you want me to explain the regular?
No, just like what is LAFC's process with the Under-22 initiative? Are we currently using it, and how do you foresee the club using it as Max talks about allocation money?
Yes, so given the makeup of our roster, we are allowed 3, and we currently use all 3 of those.
Okay.
Under 22 slots. So that's one level of spend. We have managed our budget in such a way where we have flexibility in DPs now. We have flexibility at TAM level, which is just that layer down. And we have a lot of flexibility within the league through our trades and the funds and resources that gives us now to go around the league and improve the roster.
As you look to improve the team, defensively now, Thomas Romero remains as a goalkeeper. Jamal Blackman wasn't picked up on the option. The pursuit of a goalkeeper, the defense, which when we get Eddie Segura back, and obviously Mamadou Fall as well, how do you see that building out here in 2021?
If you were to ask me now, and you asked something earlier, Vince, that I didn't address when you said the player decisions and how we're going about those. I think the way we operate here is we're very collaborative. So as many people who are here are a part of that decision. I think for me, if in an ideal world, that means the head coach is involved, particularly in the most important higher end decisions. But in any decision, I would rather have the coach involved. So insofar as that is possible, that process and that MO will continue. If the coach, for whatever reason, is not secured by a time where we feel like we need to make decisions, we have the staff here and capacity to make those decisions as well. So I just wanted to address that. And then in terms of specific areas where I think we will look to improve, I do think we will be looking at the goalkeeper position, and we will be looking to add maybe a piece or two along the back line. Now, that is not to say we do have some really, really good defenders here. I just think the makeup and the collective group, seeing how we can add to that to help each of the individuals is something we're analyzing now.
Excellent.
I think that's all the time we have for John, which has been great because you don't get this much time with a GM.
We do not, and we really appreciate it. We get a huge spike in our downloads, so we appreciate it. So we'd love to have you more often, but we know your time is very
If you could take over hosting for Matt.
I love chatting with you guys.
You want to be you could run this ship, and it's very fulfilling.
I thought you were going to say something very different there.
No, I love chatting with you guys.
Thank you, John Thorrington. Thanks for tuning in. Inside LAFC, the Max and Vince podcast will be back continuing through the offseason and get you ready what's going to be a very exciting 2022. Please subscribe, download, rate, and review. We'll see you very soon.